All right, so how does the Electoral College works? How does it do what it does? How can a person gain a majority of the popular vote and still actually lose the election? Let me demonstrate this a little bit and just give you a little bit of a sense of how it works, and then maybe a couple of quirks that are actually within the system. The idea behind the Electoral College basically is this. You've heard of the term checks and balances. They wanted, the Founding Fathers anyway, they wanted to make certain that the power was not concentrated in one group. And so when you think about it, the president can veto a bill that's passed by Congress. The Congress, for instance, can override a veto of the president. The Supreme Court can strike down a law of Congress. The idea was basically that they wanted to make absolute certain that one branch or one part of the government did not get too much power. The Electoral College, believe it or not, in a lot of respects, is a check on the system. Not so much the system maybe, but it's a check on the voters. The idea is that when you think back to it, the Founding Fathers were worried that the dirt farmers, the new voters, the newly enfranchised, might make the wrong decision. So their idea is let's set up the Electoral College so that we can correct mistakes that the voters might make, maybe out of ignorance, maybe with good intentions, maybe because simply they just didn't understand politics and the issues of the day. Now understand, how is it that indeed somebody could get a majority of the popular vote and lose? Think about this in terms of California and Wyoming. California has basically always been the largest state in the United States, at least since it's been a state. And I would venture to say that probably 1 out of every 7 Americans, or 14% of the country, lives in California. Note on this that Wyoming, while it might be the 10th largest state land-wise, is typically the state that has the smallest population. So if California has maybe 14% of 300 million Americans, Wyoming has roughly about 600,000 total population in the 10th largest state in the country. How is it that the Electoral College works? What they do is they're going to take the total number of House seats that a state has, plus the total number of Senate seats that a state has, and that's going to add up to the Electoral College vote. So when you think about this, California as the largest state has 53 House seats. These 53 House seats plus 2 Senate seats, because the Senate's based upon equality, adds up to 55 Electoral College votes. When you look at Wyoming, the smallest state, has 1 House vote. 1 House vote. And when you look at this, of course, 2 Senate votes, Wyoming is going to have 3 Electoral College votes. Let's say that you've got a presidential election where California is very, very close. Maybe it's a year where one of the Republican candidates was a governor of California. But indeed, California has got a very liberal track record. So the conservative governor running for president versus the liberal tradition of California means that candidate A wins California by 1%, maybe even a little bit less of the vote. 1% or less of the vote. Means it was pretty darn tight. In this instance, that person is going to get all of those 55 Electoral College votes. They're going to get all of those 55 Electoral College votes. When you look at Wyoming, Wyoming is typically a very, 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 very strong Republican state, which means Republicans can very easily get 75 to 80% of the vote out there. Now think about it like this. If California is almost too close to call for the entire night, meaning the person that wins California might only win it by a few 100,000 votes. And then in Wyoming, the Republican candidate, in this instance candidate B, wins a landslide, meaning maybe they win that state by 200,000 or 300,000 votes of that 600,000. Indeed, that means that candidate A is going to have gotten 55 electoral votes from California. Candidate B, in winning Wyoming convincingly, is only going to get 3 electoral votes. But odds are, if you add their huge win in Wyoming plus that narrow defeat in California, they've probably gotten more popular votes overall. This is how it works. And understand on this, you could conceivably have won Wyoming very comfortably and lost a tight race in California, and you're going to be at a landslide defeat level in terms of the Electoral College votes, because California, being the biggest state, is going to give that prize to the person that narrowly won it, and you won the state that has the smallest total of Electoral College votes, 3. This is how this can happen. Now you're probably saying, who are these electors? Typically speaking, what the candidates will do, and this is if you're a Republican running for office, this is if you're a Democrat running for office, this is if you're a Libertarian running for office, any party that's running for office that is on the ballot in that given state, they are going to pick basically a slate of electors. These folks are typically going to be really devoted party members. They're going to be people maybe that have served, that have volunteered. They're going to be folks that are influential in the community. Maybe these would be people that are big donors to the party. Now, what these folks will do, if candidate A wins California, all of the electors that candidate A are now going to go and they're going to vote in the Electoral College. Candidate B won Wyoming. Their 3 electors are going to go and vote in the Electoral College. So basically, state by state, and there are a couple of exceptions, and the chapter mentions Nebraska as being one of them. But basically, this is a winner versus all proposition. So whether you win the state with 51 to 49, or you win the state 75 to 25, you will get all of the electors from that particular state. They're going to total all of these up. Now think about a couple of things here. Number one, Election Day is the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. The first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. The Electoral College is going to be the first Monday after the second Wednesday in December. All right, now think about this. That's about 5 weeks. They gave this so that you'd have the time to basically be able to go through there, and you would basically be able to count up the different votes to figure out with absolute certainty who it was that won the election. But let's go back on this. Let's say that President Obama died tragically over Thanksgiving in 2008. President Obama, actually President-elect Obama would be a better way of saying it. The first Tuesday after the first Monday in November, he won the election. He won it comfortably. But the electors don't vote until the middle of December. Who now is going to become president? Some folks would argue it would need to be Joe Biden. Joe Biden was his running mate. Joe Biden was vice president, or vice president-elect, I should say. He should be the person that accepts the mantle. Some people would say the living person that got the most votes to be president was John McCain. And some folks would say John McCain should now be president because, indeed, the man who was going to be president is no longer alive. Some folks, maybe very controversially, would say it should be Hillary Clinton. Because when you think back to it, Hillary Clinton in 2008 got more votes to be the Democratic candidate for president than anybody in American history. More votes, primary votes, than anybody in American history. Just turned out that all of the votes that she got actually didn't count. I give you this because understand, is there a hard and fast rule? Well, no, there's not. Just because you're pledged to vote for a candidate does not mean that you are legally required to do so. So if the president happens to die after he or she gets the actual election win on that first Tuesday after the first Monday in November, the fact is that until the Electoral College actually goes in and votes, indeed, it is not 100% official. And these folks in the Electoral College, even though Hillary Clinton was not running for office, they could have voted her into office had this type of a tragedy occurred. They could conceivably have voted John McCain in because, again, he was the person that was living that had more votes in the presidential election to be president. And indeed, they, if they wanted to, could vote for me to be president because I'm over 35, I was born in the United States, and I've got 14 years of residency, which is all that it requires. One last thing, and I want to go back to this 12th Amendment that we had talked about in the idea of the quiz that in one of the earlier videos that I shot. When you go back to the election of 1800, when you go back to the election of 1796, remember George Washington was the president the first 2 years. He was a Federalist. John Adams was his vice president, a Federalist. The way that they did this at the beginning of the country was that the person that got the most votes would automatically become president. The person that got the second most votes would automatically become vice president. All right, now think about this. Who was it that got the most votes for president in 2008? Well, that's easy. President Obama did. He is the sitting president of the United States. Who was it that got the second most votes? No, it wasn't Joe Biden. It was actually John McCain. Understand on this, in the beginning of the country, the person that got the most votes would be president. The person that got the second most votes would be vice president, which means you could have Obama, a Democratic president, with McCain, a Republican vice president. The 12th Amendment changed that. Why? Because there was a shooting and a murder in the presidential election of 1800 when they were trying to figure out if it should be Jefferson or Burr that should have been president of the United States. The 12th Amendment now set it up so that the president and the vice president would be running together as opposed to separately. So today, when Obama ran and Biden was his running mate, Obama and Biden were president and vice president. Had it been McCain and Palin, it would have been the exact same thing. But in that year of 1796, indeed, when John Adams was elected president and Thomas Jefferson, a member of the other party, was vice president, the government was wrecked. And then in the election of 1800, when people started getting shot over presidential elections, they amended the Constitution to the way that we elect our presidents today. The Electoral College is controversial because when you think about it, if Al Gore can get a majority of the, or a plurality of the popular vote, but George W. is still elected president. When somebody can gain more votes than somebody else and still be elected president through the Electoral College, it almost seems like it's cheating. But this is the way the American system has been. And even today, until that Electoral College votes, we don't have a President of the United States on election night, that first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. So with this in mind, if we thought the 2000 election was bad, wait until somebody happens to take ill or very possibly die in between the election night and in between the middle of December when the Electoral College votes, because then we're really going to have a controversy. We're really going to have a struggle to figure out who's ruling the country.